It is now raining in Iran. In fact, it is also snowing. Now, for those of you who may be asking, what am I talking about? You know, you are in your country and you have regular seasons, winter, summer, you know, fall, you name it, right? And so this is just a normal thing for you. But in Iran, for a long time now, it rarely rains, right? And not to even talk about snow. But things were not always this way. Now, lately, they've noticed that rain has been falling more than usual, right? And it even snowed in Iran. So what is truly going on here? It is now being reported by some, media that are not influenced by mainstream propaganda that the United States may have been manipulating the weather in Iran. And with the destruction of all U.S. military base, the U.S. is no longer capable or able of manipulating Iranians' weather. So in addition to the fact that they were putting sanctions on Iran, they infiltrated Iran with spies. They tried to turn the population against the government of Iran. There's also a possibility that they were manipulating Iranians' weather. And the reason for that is to bring droughts so that, things like agricultural products and stuff like that will have major problems, right? The soil or the earth will be very difficult to grow anything when there's no rain. Now, for some people who are coming out and say, well, this is, conspiracy theory or whatever, well, you need to understand that in 1967, the United States had a project that they call Popeye. And this was in Vietnam. The idea here, and this was during the Vietnam War against the US, the idea was to prolong monsoon seasons or prolong raining seasons so that it will slow down Vietnamese army, right? Because when it rains, there is mud all over the place. And trucks that were driving, right? The soldiers to go from one place to the other will have a difficult time moving in the mud. And so in this operation, right? It's called Operation Popeye, right? That was created by the United States. They said it was so secret that even the soldiers who were flying planes to create rain in Vietnam, even they were not sure about what they were doing. And when a report about this came out in the 1960s, right, during the Vietnam conflict, the US government tried to hide this so much that they started claiming that this was only conspiracy theory. But later on, the CIA did admit that such operation existed. In addition to the fact that they were fighting Vietnamese, they were, doing, killing the civilians or whatever, doing whatever they could do to destroy that country. They were also manipulating the weather, creating rain longer than the normal season of the monsoon season that started, I believe, from April until August, just so that they can use the weather as a weapon of war. Even with all of that, the US still lost miserably in Vietnam. So in 2002, President Ahmadinejad, who was then the president of Iran, he went to the United Nations and mentioned this and said, the United States is manipulating the weather in Iran so that there will be droughts, right, throughout the country and they will have no rain. And when he said that, the idea here was to brush it off and say, well, this is just conspiracy theory and all of that. Turn out that there seems to be some truth in this. Because now that Iran has destroyed most of United States military base in the Gulf countries, there is a new report from CNN that shows massive destruction of US military bases in, I believe, 12 countries. I think it was 16 bases or something like that, right? And CNN report is saying that the United States government has been lying to the public or has been hiding the truth that the destructions that took place during the Iran conflict, right, with Israel, especially on military bases, on US military bases, is worse than what the government has been reporting. And most of the bases in all those Gulf countries, you can go from Iraq to Kuwait, Qatar, you name them, they've been all destroyed. They cannot be reused, not even one of them. In fact, in order for you to reuse one of those bases, you have to invest billions of dollars to rebuild them. And, wait that maybe a year or two from now, you can reopen those bases. Is that bad? And so now that Iranians are noticing that there are more rain than before, in fact, there are even snow, the country's starting to look normal again, they're now going back to what President Ahmadinejad had mentioned in 2002. When he said there's a strong possibility that the US is doing this. They're manipulating Iranians' weather. And this comes to show you the extent in which the United States and its allies can go to destroy an entire nation. The destruction that they do to nations, it affects civilians way more than government officials themselves. If this story is true, it is pure evil for you to be able to cripple a country to the point where for years, we're not talking about things that is happening for months. When we talk about the Vietnam conflict, for example, and when they started this Operation Popeye, this could have lasted only the Vietnam conflict, which was a few years, right? But when you look at Iran, and you look at the fact that for more than 40 years, the United States has been, in conflict with Iran in one way or the other. You try to think to yourself, when did they start doing this? It could have been 20 years now that they've been doing this, especially when this technology was discovered or tried in the 1960s. So if Iran, right, has been in conflict with the United States, for example, ever since Jimmy Carter was in power, right, in the 1970s, they could have started doing that then. Let's say they started it in 1980, all the way until today. We're talking about 40 years, 40-some years, that they could have been manipulating the weather in Iran. Clear and pure evil. This conflict between the US, Israel, and Iran is turning out to be a good news for Iran, because Iran has liberated itself in a way that nobody could have imagined it would have happened. Before the conflict with Iran, Iran was considered a third world that was sanctioned, in which, the population so-called wanted to stand up against the government, the population that was infiltrated by spies, the currency that was completely down. 2 months after this conflict started, Iran is now a country that is no longer sanctioned, in which the United States removed sanctions completely from Iran, is a country that now controls the Strait of Hormuz and is making money off of it. It is now freed from military bases around its borders and is starting to witness and live a normal life as a country that has a normal weather. We are discovering things with this conflict that we could not have imagined was happening. And this is just the beginning. Lord knows what we are going to discover in the future. So when people come and tell you that the weather could be manipulated, don't look at it as a conspiracy theory. This is something that has proven to be truth. The Gulf countries, for example, like the UAE, has been very open with the fact that they have been causing rain in their countries, because these are, places that has a lot of desert. From time to time, they have things that they shoot in the clouds that causes the cloud to provoke rain. They did it clearly in the UAE. It is advised against, but we understand why they're doing it, because they say, it's very difficult for them. Matter of fact, we saw a unprecedented flooding happening in the UAE. We saw Dubai, where cars were underwater. It was really bad. But this comes to show you that these things are not normal. who knows? Probably someone made a mistake and did a little bit too much, and it caused all of that stuff. So those things happen. Whether it's earthquakes, right? Tsunamis, tornadoes, hurricanes, they can manipulate those things, and they have been manipulating them for years. Those are not conspiracy theories. So if it is true that the United States has been manipulating the weather in Iran with their military bases that were all around, the destruction of those military bases turned out to be a great story and a major, liberation of the Iranian people.